Gary, thank you so much for joining us today. As we begin, can you say a few words about your current role and what's in your purview?
Sure. And just for a little bit about my background, I'm from Los Angeles, and my current role, I work for Unisys as a virtual CISO or field CISO supporting some of our customers. And I've been there for just over 7 years now. And prior to that, I worked for a variety of different companies, universities, financial services, and tech companies. So I have a pretty diverse background, which I think has helped me in my current role.
I understand. So it paints a picture. So over the years, they probably saw how cybersecurity exploded in importance, and I think we all witnessed this growth by the number of practitioners, by importance, and the impact of the threats, by how the landscape has changed from within the marketing materials was portrayed as teenagers in hoodies in their Bob's basements. I think now we're dealing with well-funded, well-resourced APTs. They're state-sponsored, so it's really enterprise-level organizations that we find as adversaries. So it's definitely, the landscape has changed, and I think as a result, a lot more people are looking into cybersecurity as a career path. Maybe they're looking to switch from technology to cybersecurity, or maybe kind of even earlier in their career journey. From your perspective and from your vantage point, what do you think? What are some of the ways maybe more junior professionals can spend their time? What are some of the 2-3 areas they should focus on to set them up for success, in your view?
That there are some specific things that for a junior person coming into the field, I think that are important. And one of the things I would stress is learn the fundamentals. There are a lot of flashy things that happen, and you pointed them out in what you were just saying, worrying about APTs and AI, and there's a lot of shiny objects in the news, and that can be distracting because the reality is most security breaches are from a lack of poor security hygiene with the fundamentals. And those things are lack of proper hardening and configuration, lack of network segmentation of systems, bad credential management. I don't know if you've heard that hackers don't break in, they log in. So you have to have good security around protecting your credentials. Other things like fundamentals, I know that there's so much to know now as opposed to when I started. And you can't be expected to know everything, but too often I'm finding that the level of knowledge is too siloed, and there needs to be a little bit more understanding of basic technologies and fundamentals so that you can tie things together. I often run into people who just don't even know what the OSI model is. And so they don't have some sort of structured way of troubleshooting problems. They don't know the difference between TCP and UDP. They don't know how DNS works. And these are some very fundamental things that I think everyone needs to have an understanding of if they're going to be in, not only in technology, but in security as well.
It makes a lot of sense. I think it's interesting that it's a very interesting way to put it, that hackers, they're breaking in, they're logging in, which means you can spend all your money and effort and focus on strengthening your front door, but you leave your porch and the screen of the backyard open.
Right. Like the best, people in cybersecurity also like to pick locks too. And one of the things we learn about the best lockpick is the key. So
Exactly. It's interesting. I actually got about 3 years ago. I got a business card that was structured as you can peel the. It's a kit essentially to pick locks, and it was a card of Kevin Mitnick, who unfortunately passed away fairly
recently.
very sad.
Yeah, so like a credit card, a lockpick credit card. I've seen those. You put it in your wallet.
Exactly. It was pretty awesome. It's interesting because it's, to your point, as defenders, we have to be right 100% of the time, but attackers only need to be right once. So naturally they're looking for the weakest link, for the low-hanging fruit. And
and that's also an adage that sometimes I think is not 100% correct either. That is, and the reason why is, in order for an attacker to actually take over an environment, there are a lot of stepping stones that they have to successfully get over. And when in order to basically, for instance, breach an environment, pivot to somewhere where there's crown jewels or data that they want, and then be able to exfiltrate it, that's a sequence of like 15 different steps that should have been potentially protected or detected. So when that happens, it leans more toward a fundamental failure of an entire security program rather than just not getting it 100% right. It's one way of thinking about it, but it takes a lot of things to fail, or a lot of lack of protections and detections to not be in place in order for a true major breach to happen.
It's interesting. So it's not essentially what you're saying is a lot of doors need to be open. That one door leads to another for the attack to be successful.
Right. Like, when we were talking about a house, first of all, you'd have to have left the front door unlocked. Then someone would have to have come in, and the dogs would have had to have not been able to stop that person. And then the alarm system didn't go off because someone didn't set the alarm.
And the safe combination is written on a post-it note and taped next to the safe, right?
Right. And then, you have neighborhood patrols that maybe didn't come by at that time. And it's just a sequence of things that all have to go wrong in order for a successful thing to happen.
Well, let's take a live example. The breach that happened when attackers gained access to Microsoft hosted email accounts of government executives. I think they did a post-mortem and they analyzed what happened. So the attacker got access to the crash dumps that they accessed via a third-party provider. In those crash dumps, they acquired a key that then they used to access the email server where they got access to the email. So it sounds like between third-party providers and the cloud, you don't have a perimeter, so a house, right? So it's almost like several houses that you need to worry about, that each of them could be used as an entry point.
Sure. And I don't remember that exact scenario, and when they were acquiring the key, I thought they were able to get into a certain account. The key let them into someone's mailbox, not the entire back end. And that person's mailbox didn't have multi-factor authentication. I'm thinking that was part of it, but that was a while back, so I don't remember all the specifics.
Oh, for sure. It's interesting, a very interesting conversation. From your perspective, because you have a very kind of senior cybersecurity roles in various organizations, but now you're supporting clients of Unisys, so you both also have kind of the cybersecurity vendor perspective and a cybersecurity practitioner perspective. What's your sense in terms of the industry? I think there's a lot of practitioners are dealing with so many different dashboards, so many different products, so many kind of a fire hose of alerts that they're trying to prioritize. What's your sense in terms of where's the industry going? Is there going to be consolidation? Do you think all the larger players, the Palo Altos and the Checkpoints and of this world, do you think they will pick up some of the startups and there will be kind of a unified dashboard rather than multiple products? I hear that some of the CISOs are dealing with 50, 60 products. So 50, 60 different vendors that they're, one, have a relationship with, but two, worry how those products interoperate. Are there any gaps between them that will potentially be a cybersecurity challenge? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it has to go that way. I mean, that's just, we've always seen that kind of trend where the big fish gobble up the little fish and incorporate that into their product. And sometimes it's incorporated as an essential feature that you need, and sometimes it's incorporated as something additional you can purchase, but at least it puts it all under one pane of glass. But yeah, it's challenging because there are so many different niches that someone can attack, and so organizations look to protect, but that just kind of continuously means adding another product and another product, like you were just explaining, and you end up with having to deal with 50 dashboards of products, and it's overwhelming and it becomes hard to maintain. And one of the things that I advocate for security is, in order for security to be effective, it has to be sustainable, it has to be something that you can maintain. And you can't really do that effectively if you're dealing with 50 different dashboards. So you have to have it in a integrated manner where all these different pieces come together in one solution. Otherwise, some of those solutions, even though they might seem necessary, aren't going to be as effective just because you can't sustain that.
Certainly. Well, it's an alert that is not acted on. Like it's almost, what's the value? What's the benefit of something that if you cannot see it, analyze it, act on it, what's the ultimate benefit of the tool? And then
right. And I think a long time ago, the SIM was seen as that sort of like centralized way of pulling all those security products together. So you have these 50 products and they all send their alerts to the SIM. And then if the SIM triggers a detection, you would then go to that dashboard to dig in and identify. But what I found is that SIMs, can break too, and sometimes they fail in parsing those events, and they also can maybe not recognize the fact that you have this product that stopped sending those alerts to the SIM because that dashboard stopped working itself. So it still, SIMs are seen as a expensive and tedious and difficult thing at times. And that's where MDR, XDR solutions are trying to make a more headway by integrating a lot of what they determine as the essential security monitoring pieces into their solutions. But they also miss certain things. So then you still have blind spots, and you need to add more products to cover those blind spots.
It sounds like a never-ending.
It's a little frustrating, and the attacks change, and so you constantly have to keep evolving to stay ahead of those attacks. Like when we were talking about what do you need to tell someone to focus on, what's the important stuff, and I said, well, it's the basics. Well, but at the same time, not to contradict myself, but it's also important to know what's going to be next. What are those threats that are looming? Because you want to stay ahead of where the attacks are going to be. So you want to do sort of like the Wayne Gretzky philosophy of playing hockey, is not skate to where the puck is, but skate to where it's going to be. So you want to know what threats are on the horizon so that you can plan your security protections around those future threats. And maybe some of those future threats start to become looking like deep fakes and all those other, flashy, shiny threats that make all the headlines. Don't forget the fundamentals, but at the same time, be aware of what is on the horizon, because you do want to be able to plan your security program around what is potentially going to be a threat of the future.
It's interesting. It's so it sounds like take care of basic housekeeping, but also don't forget to lift your head and look at the big picture where everything is going.
Absolutely.
Interesting. And talking of where the puck is going to be, what do you think? How do those threats will evolve? What are you seeing now that will manifest itself in 6 months from now, 12 months from now? What do you think? What some of the emerging, whether it's threat vectors or tactics or approaches that you see that that attackers are using that will be more and more prevalent down the line?
Right. Well, you hear a lot about generative AI and attackers using that to try and build exploits quicker, or to create exploits that are not as detectable. And so I see security products, and I know a lot of them already are, incorporating that same type of AI technology to expedite detection as well as resolution of these types of threats. So SIM solutions are incorporating AI, and your XDR solutions are incorporating. You see commercials on TV about solutions, and they talk about how they have these next gen AI solutions as part of their security product. And I'd say that that is what is most apparent to me on the forefront of my radar as far as where things are going.
So
And it's important that organizations also have some sort of policy in place to at least let the organization associates know not to post organizational information or sensitive information into these public generative AI solutions, because they ingest that. But the organizations that want to stay ahead of it, they're going to create their own AI sandbox that's secure and internal to that company that their associates can use.
Interesting. I hear the people talking about poisoning data sets that are used to train those LLM models. So an attacker can insert data that's malicious.
Yeah, there was a company that did a proof of concept by poisoning the large language model, and people downloaded this LLM for their AI and were wondering why it said things like the Eiffel Tower was in Rome. So they proved that these large language models could be poisoned, and you also then have to build in a whole trust element of your supply chain, basically where you're getting your trusted large language models from, because they could potentially be poisoned if you don't get them from a trusted source.
Interesting. I think it's I think there's a handful of companies that kind of bridging the real world and the virtual world in terms of what's true and what's not, so that the virtual world knows like the immutable facts, and that there are oracles and verification. I think some of, not to go down this rabbit hole, but a lot of them kind of the blockchain related products that multiple verifications would kind of help with that. So it's certainly it will be interesting to see how all this plays out. It's again kind of going back to kind of the proliferation of products and the ever-changing, ever-emerging landscape in cybersecurity. I think you have a very kind of unique perspective of being an executive in the cybersecurity space, but also working with clients who are cybersecurity practitioners. I wonder what your and you've probably been on the receiving end of the sales calls and the marketing messages of very eager SDRs and BDRs and cybersecurity marketers. We kind of sit between the two worlds. We talk to cybersecurity companies and we talk to cybersecurity executives. Obviously, CISOs need all those vendors, all those tools, but sometimes cybersecurity vendors, they're kind of very incentivized to be very kind of, maybe aggressive is the wrong word, but very kind of forceful in terms of how they get their messaging across and how they try to get access, try to get attention of cybersecurity executives, which kind of leads to all sorts of types of friction and noise and waste. And again, I would imagine you've probably been the receiving end of some of those. What would you say would be some of the best practices, some of the vendors, cybersecurity vendors that impressed you in a way they build a relationship and play the long game? And what are some of your pet peeves of some of the tactics, some of the things that cybersecurity vendors, salespeople of cybersecurity vendors do that kind of would rub you the wrong way?
Yeah, well, I'd say to start, some of the important aspects of a solution that I'm looking for gets along the same lines of we were talking about this proliferation of dashboards. I need a solution that's not just going to add another dashboard, but will replace one. So if if I'm being approached by a vendor who wants to deliver a better security mousetrap to me, they have to tell me how that mousetrap is going to replace one or more existing solutions. But one of the problems I often see, and I'll give you an example, is EDR solutions. These are your better antivirus software. They have an agent. Agent gets installed on your desktop server systems. And now a lot of these are adding in vulnerability management, vulnerability detection capabilities, which is great because you have the agent there, makes sense. But I can't replace my vulnerability scanner with that, despite the fact that it's a great thing that they're adding that in. It's just not good enough because I still need to scan all my devices and I need to do an external scan of my network. So I can't get rid of my vulnerability management solution and replace it with this EDR solution.
So it's almost, and it probably has to do with the fact that vendors, they're looking for growth. So they're kind of getting their elbows out and trying to encroach on their competitors or adjacent markets.
Yeah, but they just haven't baked in everything. They're just adding in some aspect of capability, but it's not good enough to replace something else. So, but if I was a small organization just starting out with a solution that has a lot of these facets all incorporated in, that would be pretty good. Now, one of the things I've seen is my vulnerability scanning solution actually has now added in EDR capabilities. Now, my vulnerability scanning system does actually the comprehensive scanning, but do I trust them as an EDR provider? I don't know, not yet. I'm pretty happy with my current EDR solutions. So I guess I will wait and see. And this gets back to, will we see consolidation? Absolutely. We will start to see more and more consolidation because we don't want those 50 panes of glass. We're going to want a solution that has more comprehensive single pane of glass coverage of these different needs.
Exactly. Well, given the economic environment, I think it's going to be, I think the Palo Altos and the Ciscos and the checkpoints and the Fortinets will have a field day in picking some of those point solutions and creating something that's kind of more comprehensive and more 360 rather than like siloed offerings with separate dashboards. Gary, I know we're coming up on time.
Yep.
I thank you so much for taking time for this. This was very interesting, very insightful. I learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners will too. Where can people find you? What's the best way to connect?
I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter. Those probably the best ways to find me. My LinkedIn account does ask people to enter an email address if they want to actually connect with me, but they can follow me. But my email address is quite simple to figure out, as is most people's. It's just my first name dot last name at pretty much any extension. I have almost all of them with my first name dot last name at Gmail, at Outlook, at Yahoo, and even at my company name. So
Great.
that's the best way. If anyone's interested in connecting, they can reach out.
Awesome. Gary, thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Misha.
Thank you.